There is a truth that echoes across the ages, a truth older than kingdoms, older than monuments, older than the first fires that humans ever lit in the wilderness. It is the truth that every voice on earth, every language we speak, every word we use to express hope, fear, love, or purpose can be traced back to a single source. Long before borders, long before nations, long before division, humanity spoke with one voice. And when linguists search for the roots of human speech, when they dig through centuries of migrations, cultures, and transformations, they find themselves returning again and again to the same place, the cradle of civilization, the birthplace of humanity, the land where the first rhythms of speech began. Africa. To understand this story, you must imagine a time when human beings were few in number but rich in curiosity. A time when families walked beneath open skies, leaving footprints across wide landscapes and carrying nothing but their memory, their courage, and their voice. And from that voice, language was born. Not in textbooks, not in classrooms, not in scholarly institutions, but in the simple, powerful necessity to communicate. Mothers teaching children, elders warning youth, communities sharing knowledge that meant survival. Words became tools as important as fire. Sounds became the first bridges between human hearts. And Africa, broad, diverse, ancient Africa, was the ground where those first bridges were built. But this is not just a story about anthropology or linguistics. It is a story about identity. It is a story about connection. It is a story about understanding that the human voice, your voice, carries within it a piece of history that reaches back hundreds of thousands of years. Somewhere deep inside you is an echo of the first people who ever spoke on this planet. Their courage flows in your blood, their innovation moves in your mind, and their voices whisper within your own speech today. Every language we speak, whether English, French, Zulu, Arabic, Swahili, Amharic, or any other tongue, contains fragments of those first sounds, those first attempts to make meaning out of life. Scientists can debate many things. They can question theories, rewrite models, update data. But what they do not question anymore is this: the earliest humans lived in Africa. And where humans live, language is born. Language is not a modern invention. It is ancient, older than writing, older than farming, older than cities. The people who roamed African landscapes tens of thousands of years ago were not primitive wanderers. They were thinkers, innovators, teachers, storytellers. They developed complex communication systems not because they wanted to sound impressive, but because they needed to pass down knowledge that kept them alive, and over generations this knowledge became language, structured, meaningful, shared, evolving, alive. When linguists trace the roots of language families, Indo-European, Afro-Asiatic, Sino-Tibetan, Bantu, Niger-Congo, Khoisan, they uncover patterns that point back to Africa. Some of the world's oldest linguistic cliques are spoken by the Khoisan people of southern Africa. These sounds are unlike anything found elsewhere, suggesting that they may be remnants of humanity's earliest speech. It is as if these languages preserved a melody that the rest of the world has long forgotten. And even when languages are vastly different today, their rhythms, structures, and patterns often lead researchers back to ancient African speech communities. But this story is not a history lesson. It is a mirror, a reminder, a call to recognize something deep within yourself. You are connected to a legacy of communication that predates kings and queens, predates empires and eras. When you wake up and speak a word to someone you love, when you express your dreams, your frustrations, your ideas, you are participating in a tradition that began with the earliest human, a tradition that was shaped in African soil, carried across continents, adapted through migrations, and transformed through time, but never destroyed. Languages can evolve, but the human need to speak, to express, to communicate, that remains constant. And more importantly, the human capacity to connect through language remains one of our greatest strengths. Consider what language does. It builds relationships, creates communities, resolves conflicts, teaches lessons, preserves memories, and passes wisdom from one generation to the next. Every major advancement in human civilization, from agriculture to architecture, from science to philosophy, began with communication. People needed to discuss ideas, challenge each other, collaborate, and create shared meaning. Every step forward humanity has taken was made possible by words, and the first steps of that journey were taken in Africa. When you understand that the root of all speech comes from a single place, you begin to see humanity differently. You begin to see that our differences are not barriers, they are branches from the same tree. Languages diverged because people traveled, adapted, and built cultures that reflected their surroundings. But no matter how far we traveled, no matter how many words we invented, the core remains the same. We speak because we are human. We communicate because we are connected. And every time you interact with another person, whether through kindness, conflict, or collaboration, you are continuing a story that began long before you were born. This truth holds power. It tells you that communication is not something to take light. It is not something to waste on negativity, on small-mindedness, on tearing others down. Your words carry history, identity, and influence. They have the power to lift someone up or break someone down. They have the power to create opportunity or destroy. When ancient Africans developed language, they used it to teach survival, strengthen communities, and pass down wisdom that protected future generations. If your words are part of that same lineage, then ask yourself, how are you using them? Are you building or breaking? Are you uplifting or hurting? Are you shaping the world or shrinking from it? Your voice is one of the most powerful tools you will ever possess, not because of its volume or its tone, but because of its ability to carry meaning. A single sentence can inspire change. A single conversation can spark an idea. A single message can alter the course of someone's life. And the responsibility of language, this ancient gift that began in Africa, rests on your shoulders today. You are part of the lineage of communicators who shaped the world with their words. How you speak, what you say, and the intention behind your voice all contribute to the world you help create. But this story also teaches resilience. Languages disappear, cultures shift, words change, yet the core of human speech remains. Because the human spirit refuses to be silent. It adapts, it evolves, it grows. There have been times in history when African languages were suppressed, erased, banned, or ridiculed, yet they survived. They survived in whispers, in songs, in memories, in names, in stories. They traveled across oceans through people who refused to forget where they came from. They persisted because identity persists, and that resilience lives in you. Every challenge you face, every obstacle that tries to silence you, is an invitation to rise, to speak, to continue the legacy of survival encoded in your voice. Remember this, language is not just spoken, it is lived. The way you carry yourself, the way you treat people, the way you move through the world, these are all forms of communication. Before the first words were spoken, early humans communicated through gestures, expressions, emotions, and action. They learned to understand each other not because they spoke perfectly, but because they paid attention. And today, as complex as languages have become, the heart of communication remains the same. People want to be understood. People want to be heard. People want to feel seen. And you have the ability to create that for someone every single day. The story of language beginning in Africa is not just a scientific discovery. It is an affirmation that humanity is more connected than we often realize. It reminds you that you belong to something larger, a global family, a shared history, a collective voice that spans continents and generations. And understanding this truth gives you strength. You are not walking through life alone. You are walking with the echoes of millions who came before you. You are carrying their courage, their creativity, their resilience, and in the same way they shaped the world with their words, you have the power to shape your world with yours. So speak with purpose, speak with honesty, speak with courage, speak with the awareness that your voice is part of a story that began in ancient African soil and continues through you today. You are not just speaking a language, you are carrying a legacy. And when you use your words to inspire, to teach, to heal, to uplift, you honor the very first voices that ever rose on this planet. You honor the mother tongues of the earth. You honor the ancestors who gave humanity its first gift of communication. And you remind the world that no matter how far we travel, no matter how different we seem, we all come from the same voice, one that still lives in us, speaks through us, and guides us into the future. Africa is not just the birthplace of humanity, it is the birthplace of language itself, where the earliest humans discovered that sound could shape meaning, that a voice could carry memory, and that communication could build bridges between minds long before any tool or instrument existed, long before writing, long before art on cave walls, long before symbols were carved into stone. Human beings used their tongues, their breath, and their imagination to create the first systems of expression. These early voices were not random noises. They were the foundation of human connection. They were the earliest attempt to make sense of the world, to warn others of danger, to celebrate victories, to teach children, to guide communities, to pass down wisdom, and to ensure that no important lesson faded away. In this vast landscape where life began, language was born not in silence but in intention, shaped by people who understood that survival required unity, and unity required communication. When scholars study ancient languages, they do not look to modern cities. They look to the past, to the soil where humanity first walked upright, to the communities that learned to form structured sounds that carried purpose and emotion. It is in African languages that we find some of the most complex sound systems, tones, clicks, and patterns that reveal just how sophisticated early human communication truly was. These are not primitive leftovers of an ancient world. They are clues that the earliest speakers were thinkers, innovators, and builders of meaning. Every syllable holds echoes of the past. Every sound reveals the creativity of people who saw language not just as a tool, but as a living force capable of shaping reality. They spoke with intention because every word had weight. A message could determine whether the tribe survived a storm, found the right path, or taught the young how to live with honor and skill. As humanity spread around the world, those earliest linguistic seeds traveled with them. Every language spoken today carries traces of the original patterns created in Africa. Whether it is a tone, a rhythm, a grammatical structure, or the way certain sounds are formed, the clues are always there. Modern linguists trace these connections not to diminish any culture, but to honor the truth that all humanity is intertwined through its first voice. This means that every language on earth, no matter how modern, no matter how advanced, no matter how different, has its earliest ancestor in those original African tongues. That is not just scientific truth. It is a reminder of the unity of the human story. It means that even when people fight over differences, argue over borders, or divide themselves through culture, they are all still connected by the same ancient source. Every voice today is an echo of the first voices that rose beneath the African sky. When we say Africa is the cradle of language, we are saying something profound about human identity. We are acknowledging that language is not simply a system of words, but an inheritance. It carries memory. It carries struggle. It carries joy. It carries the wisdom of those who came before us. And because Africa was the first place where language took root, it means the earliest memories of humanity were stored there. Imagine the first stories ever told. Imagine the first mother soothing her child with sound. Imagine the first hunters coordinating their movements with calls and gestures. Imagine the first elders passing down lessons to keep the community safe. None of this was written, yet it lasted. It lasted because language itself was strong enough to hold knowledge through time. And the people who lived on that ancient land understood the responsibility of preserving their voice. The beauty of this truth is that it shows how powerful human memory is. Long before paper, memory was the library. Long before writing, the tongue was the archive. Long before dictionaries, human beings carried entire histories in their minds. Africa mastered this art. Oral tradition became a science, a discipline, a sacred duty that ensured nothing important was forgotten. Griots, elders, storytellers, and teachers committed their lives to protecting knowledge, not through books but through speech. They memorized genealogies stretching back centuries. They recited battles, migrations, marriages, births, victories, and laws. They did not break the chain. They honored the gift of language by using it to preserve identity. And even today, those oral traditions continue to inspire scholars, poets, linguists, and historians who recognize their immense value. The earliest languages also shaped how people thought. When humans discovered how to name things, they discovered how to understand them. When they gave meaning to objects, emotions, and experiences, they were not just communicating, They were building the foundation of human intelligence. Language allowed people to imagine what did not yet exist. It allowed them to dream, plan, organize, innovate, and create. Every invention, every idea, every civilization began with a conversation. And the first of those conversations happened in Africa. The first agreements, the first disagreements, the first negotiations, and the first expressions of love or grief all originated in the tongues of people who knew that words had power. They learned that speech could build communities or destroy them. They learned that language shaped reality, shaped identity, shaped destiny. It is impossible to overstate how significant this is for the world today. When people understand that all speech has a common origin, they begin to realize that unity is not an abstract idea. It is built into the human design. No matter how different tongues sound today, they are all branches of the same ancient tree. That means no culture is superior to another. It means no language is inferior or primitive. Every voice is part of the same global story. This understanding dissolves division. It replaces ignorance with respect. It strengthens the belief that humanity is connected by something deeper than borders or flags. It reveals a shared ancestry not just in blood, but in speech. And yet this truth also gives African languages the honor they deserve. They are not simply regional tongues. They are the living descendants of the world's oldest linguistic ancestors. They carry structures that existed before writing. They hold patterns that shaped the evolution of speech across continents. They contain the memories of thousands of years of survival, creativity, and wisdom. When someone speaks an African language today, they are not just communicating, they are participating in the oldest surviving conversation in human history. They are honoring the original makers of meaning. They are continuing a tradition that shaped the world long before modern civilization took form. Understanding this helps us recognize the importance of preserving languages today. Every language lost is not just a set of words disappearing. It is a piece of human history fading from existence. It is a chapter of our shared story being erased. This is why scholars fight to protect endangered languages. This is why communities strive to teach their children the tongues of their ancestors. They know that language is identity. Language is memory. Language is the bridge between past and future. And preserving it means preserving ourselves. When we acknowledge Africa as the birthplace of language, we do not just honor the past, we empower the present. We remind people of African descent that their heritage is not defined by struggle alone, but by unmatched intellectual achievement. They come from the first thinkers, the first storytellers, the first communicators. They inherit a legacy of brilliance. And when they speak, whether in English, Swahili, Yoruba, Zulu, Amharic, Arabic, or any tongue, they continue the story that began with those early voices under the African sky. They are not detached from history. They are living proof of it. This keynote is a call to understand the greatness woven into the human voice. It is a reminder that language is more than sound. It is a legacy. It is a bridge. It is a mirror. It is the thread that connects all of humanity back to one origin. And the origin of that thread lies deep in the heart of Africa, where the first voices rose, the first meanings formed, and the first human beings spoke, the first words that would one day shape the entire world. Every language we hear today, no matter how distant or modern it seems, carries echoes of ancient African tongues, proving that the world is more connected than we realize and that the wisdom of the continent flows through global speech like a hidden river. When we talk about the origins of language, many people picture faraway places, ancient kingdoms, or mysterious civilizations. But the deeper scientists dig, the more evidence they uncover, showing that the starting point of human speech does not lie scattered across different corners of the world. It traces back to one root, one source, one cradle of humanity, Africa. This truth stretches far beyond culture or pride. It is a reminder that the human family began with one voice, and the sounds of that voice continue to shape the words we speak today. Whether we are whispering in English, chanting in Mandarin, conversing in Arabic, or singing in Spanish, beneath every modern language is an ancient vibration, a rhythm carried from ancestors who first shaped sound into meaning in the heart of Africa. When linguists analyze the structure of words, the music of tones, the way consonants strike like drums and vowels flow like rivers, they discover patterns that connect languages separated by continents. Click consonants found in Khoisan languages appear as distant cousins in unexpected places. Tonal patterns used in West African languages mirror ancient phonetic structures preserved in parts of Asia. The grammatical roots found in Bantu languages are echoed in the underlying architecture of languages spoken thousands miles away. These similarities did not happen by accident. They exist because humans migrated out of Africa, carrying their speech with them, shaping it, adapting it, expanding it, but never replacing the foundation on which all communication was built. Modern languages are like branches, and Africa is the trunk from which they grew. The accents and dialects we hear today are like leaves, each unique, but all connected to one shared beginning. This connection is powerful because it reminds us that language is more than words. It is memory. It is identity. It is the living archive of our journey as a species. When early African ancestors combined sounds to express emotions, warn others of danger, name the world around them, or share stories, they were doing more than communicating. They were creating a blueprint for future generations. They were shaping the mental habits that would one day influence everything from poetry to politics, from philosophy to prayer, from lullabies to law. Those early vocal patterns carried inside them the seeds of every modern alphabet, every grammatical rule, and every linguistic tradition humanity would later develop. And even now, those seeds remain, scattered across languages like hidden signatures that point back to where speech began. You can hear those ancient echoes in the rhythm of African American spirituals, in the chanting traditions of East Africa, in the praise poetry of Southern Africa, and in the storytelling patterns of West African griots. But you can also hear them in places far beyond the continent. You hear them in the way indigenous groups in Australia use vocal clicks during ritual speech. You hear them in the tonal rises and falls of Southeast Asian languages. You hear them in the dramatic breathing patterns found in Middle Eastern chant. You hear them in the deep vowel stretches used in European folk traditions. These similarities remind us that human beings share more than we realize. We speak differently, but the foundation that birthed our voices is the same. We may live in different nations, but our tongues were shaped by the same ancient source. The world's languages are not strangers to each other. They are long-lost siblings. This truth should not divide us. It should unite us. It should remind us that humanity has always been interconnected. Borders may separate land, but language reveals our shared history. The sounds that form our names, our songs, our stories, our laughter carry traces of the same creative spirit that flowed through those who first gave meaning to sound in Africa. When we talk, we are using tools shaped by ancestors we have never met but who shaped the world for us. When we speak, we are participating in a tradition older than writing, older than pyramids, older than cities. The words we use today are part of a river of sound that has been flowing for over 200,000 years. And like any river, it has currents, bends and branches, but it begins at one source. Understanding this truth encourages us to value language more deeply. Every language is a treasure chest of culture carrying the worldview, humor, logic, and soul of the people who speak it. When one language dies, we lose a piece of human memory, a piece of the journey that began in Africa. But when languages are preserved, honored, and celebrated, we keep alive fragments of that original spark. We maintain the connection between past and present. We keep the river flowing, and we remind future generations that their voices are part of a story far older and larger than themselves. Most importantly, this truth empowers people of African descent to stand taller, speak louder, and embrace the richness of their heritage. For too long, the world has portrayed Africa as a place that received knowledge instead of giving. But the science of linguistics tells a different story, a truer story. It tells us that Africa is not just the birthplace of humanity, but the birthplace of human expression. It tells us that the world learned to speak by listening to Africans who used sound to build meaning, community, and civilization. It tells us that Africa is not just a chapter in human history. it is the prologue, and that when we speak today, any language, any dialect, any accent, we are carrying forward the legacy of the first minds that shaped thought into sound. When we recognize this, something shifts inside us. We begin to understand that language is not random. It is sacred. It is powerful. It is a reminder that regardless of our differences, we are connected by a shared origin, and this connection carries responsibility. It calls us to preserve languages, honor cultures, and respect the voices of all people. It challenges us to listen more deeply, speak more intentionally, and appreciate the vast diversity of languages that blossomed from one ancestral root. And it reminds us that no matter how far humanity travels, the echoes of Africa remain in our words, our expressions, and our ability to communicate with one another. In this way, the world's languages are not just evidence of migration, they are evidence of unity, evidence that we come from the same story, evidence that beneath every difference there is a deeper similarity, evidence that human beings have always been connected by more than what divides them. And the greatest proof of this connection lies not in monuments, scriptures, or ancient ruins, but in the simple act of speaking. Whenever we open our mouths, we carry forward the memory of the first humans who shaped sound into meaning, and those humans lived in Africa. Thus every language is a reminder, a whisper from the ancient world that we are one people, one family, shaped by the same breath and bound by the same origin. Understanding the roots of language is not about the past alone. It is about reclaiming identity, restoring dignity, and recognizing that the voices of today carry the DNA of those who spoke the world into meaning thousands of years ago. When we talk about language, we are not talking about grammar or rules written in dusty textbooks. We are talking about the heartbeat of a people, the rhythm of their existence, the echoes of their ancestors still vibrating in every syllable. To understand where language began is to understand where humanity began. And that journey always leads back to Africa, the cradle of speech, the birthplace of human expression, the origin of the world's earliest tongues. Linguists study this not merely as scholars, but as explorers, searching for the first breath of human communication. And yet what they discover does more than fill academic papers. It helps us see ourselves with clearer eyes. It reminds us that the voices we hear today, whether in cities, villages, or rural communities, carry shades of ancient tones that once spread across endless plains and deep forests. When people realize that their language carries a history older than empires, older than borders, older than the concept of nations itself, something shifts inside them. They begin to speak differently, stand differently, think differently, because suddenly they realize they are not just participants in history, they are descendants of the very first storytellers, the first singers, the first communicators to shape meaning out of sound. Their words do not float into the air and disappear. They connect to a chain of human experience stretching back tens of thousands of years. This awareness does something powerful to a person's spirit. It restores pride where the world tried to plant shame. It restores confidence where the world tried to create doubt. It restores dignity where the world once tried to erase identity. When linguists trace languages back to Africa, they are not simply tracing sound patterns or vocabulary roots. They are tracing migrations, memories, and mindset. They are following the footprints of ancestors who walked across continents and carried their languages like living treasures. These languages evolved, adapted, blended, and branched into thousands of variations. Yet no matter how far they traveled, they retained the signature of where they began. That is the miracle of language. It changes, but it remembers. And when human beings recognize that their speech, whether English, Swahili, Yoruba, Zulu, Luo, Amharic, Igbo, or any other tongue carries ancient African fingerprints, they realize they are part of something far greater than their individual lives. This understanding transforms how people relate to each other. They stop seeing language as a divider and start seeing it as evidence of shared origins. They recognize that the diversity of speech is not a sign of separation, but a sign of creativity. It proves that human beings have always adapted, innovated, and added color to the world through communication. When you understand that your voice carries genetic memory, You speak with more intention. You listen with more respect. You communicate with more purpose. Every word becomes more than just a sound. It becomes a continuation of an ancient legacy that refuses to die. This is why reclaiming the roots of language matters. It is not about nostalgia or archaeology. It is about knowing yourself in a way the modern world often prevents. It is about understanding that your existence is not random. You come from a lineage of thinkers, dreamers, survivors, and innovators. The first humans who shaped sounds into meaning were not primitive or lost. They were brilliant. They were observant. They were creative enough to develop systems of communication that would eventually evolve into every language spoken across the globe today. When people learn this truth, something awakens inside them. They stop underestimating themselves. They stop believing the lie that they come from nothing. They start realizing that they come from the very source of human expression. And so the roots of language become a mirror that reflects not only where humanity began, but where each individual belongs. It reminds people that identity is not something the world gives you. It is something you inherit through the voices that came before you. The words you speak today carry traces of your ancestors' laughter, their struggles, their survival, their wisdom, and their imagination. This is why you cannot treat language casually. It is a living archive of the human soul. It is a vessel of memory. It is a symbol of dignity. When you understand that you speak with pride, not arrogance, but awareness. In a world that often pushes people to forget where they come from, rediscovering the origins of language becomes an act of empowerment. It becomes a reminder that no matter how much the world changes, your roots remain strong. And when you reconnect to those roots, you stand tall. You speak with clarity. You move with purpose. Because deep down you know that the voice inside you is not new. It is ancient. It is wise. It is carrying the essence of generations who lived, learned, and left their mark on the world long before you were born. This truth changes everything. It gives you strength you did not know you had. It gives you a sense of belonging you thought you lost. It allows you to claim your place in the tapestry of humanity with confidence and dignity. Understanding the roots of language means reclaiming the truth that your identity is not fragile or borrowed. It is foundational. It is strong enough to survive migration, colonization, globalization, and transformation. It is woven into your voice, your thoughts, your expressions, and your way of seeing the world. And when you embrace that truth, you carry not only your own story but the story of humanity itself.